What up? Welcome to Homegrown Hustle, where local brilliance takes the center stage. I'm your host, Matt Eickman. Together, we're about to embark on an inspiring journey. Our community thrives on the wisdom of insightful leaders that are right here in our backyard. And we're bringing their expertise to your ears. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your guide. Join us every week in celebrating innovation, guidance, and the power to inspire greatness. Let's explore the stories that shape our local business landscape, and together, let's ignite the spark of excellence. Mr. Chris Knight, the Dark Knight, one of my favorite people in my networking group. Great backstory. City of Fridley Police Department for 16 years. Had some adversity in his life. Actually was forced, if I remember correctly, into switching careers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now he's currently one of the best car salesmen in the state of Minnesota. I've worked with him personally. We're just going to go straight to your experience as a police officer. So 16 years with the city of Fridley that entire time, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so let's go. What if we just go top 3 favorite cop stories of all time in your 16 years? And we'll start peeling the layers back as you kind of give a story, and then talk about how it relates to your business now.
Okay.
Cool with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go top 3. Cycle through them real fast. One of them, if you're talking seriousness, but listen when you're told something, a bank robbery at a bank in town that happened right when the bank was opening. And I got there, got in a foot pursuit with the guy. The die pack went off as he was running up a few blocks ahead of me in the snow. So it made it easy to track me.
Mm-hmm.
It made it easy for me to track him as well, of course. I had some other partners there setting up a perimeter as well. Myself and a partner get up there. And it's snow, slushy on the ground. Yelling at him, get on the ground, get on the ground. He didn't want to. He's got pink dye all over. Ended up dropping the bag just a few steps back from where we were. He got down on his knees, but he's like, no, I'm not laying down. But what do you normally have when you rob a bank? If you're a decent bank robber, some sort of weapon, right? So I'm like, no, you're going to lay out on the ground. That's how this is going to go. So he didn't want to. He's on his knees, and as I got closer, and my one partner came up on the side, I ended up, this is your last chance. Get on the ground. We're going to put you on the ground. So he's on his knees, hands up. His one hand came down a little bit and kicked him just once, square foot, right in the center of the chest and knocked him backwards on the ground.
Straight.
So he rolled over, just straight boom, just to knock him over. Just much like that. A buddy of mine that was there and saw it from behind me said it kind of looked like a Matrix move sort of deal.
That's amazing. Is there body cam footage?
There was not at the time. There was not. It was before body cam.
Okay.
But the best part is we get him up to jail, and I have size 13 boots that I wore for work. And walk him into jail, and as we get up there, the jailer looks over, and he looks at the guy, looks at me, he looks at the guy, he's like, Knight, what size boots you wearing? I said 13. He goes, you should listen to Knight next time. I think you put one in your chest just to get him on the ground, but, I got to make sure his hands aren't going to grab a weapon, right?
Yeah.
Thoughts aren't what hurt me, it's a weapon.
I mean,
right?
I have a tendency to go on tangents. Let's get to the other 2 stories, and then I'll peel in some layers back.
So what happened is in 2007, a guy who was high on meth trying to kill my partner and I and ambush us, he got in a knockdown drag-out fight with the 2 of us, and I tore all the ligaments in my shoulder. So I've got a big scar like this big from when they rebuilt my shoulder. Yeah. I fought my way back through PT and other stuff like that. I wasn't anywhere near ready to be done being an officer yet. Mm-hmm. So I had a little bit of nerve damage going on, but nothing terrible. I was still able to work fine and everything like that. But then in 2014, I tore all the ligaments in my wrist fighting with somebody who was trying to kill themselves and successfully kept them from doing that. But I tore all the ligaments in my wrist in that process. Mm-hmm. So because of the existing damage that was done, the new damage that was done here, my wrist did not come back. And that's what took me off the job.
Yeah, bro.
That's the short answer. So, yes.
Is that one of your next 2 stories?
One of them could be a build in a little bit of those 2. Otherwise, there's a time I got called baby cop because I was hired as so young as an officer. In the middle of a bar fight, this guy says, "You can tell what to do." Called me baby cop. And, yeah, my partner behind me.
They took your fucking man card over.
Yeah, straight there.
All right, number 2 story.
Number 2. So I was hired in my early 20s, which is the earliest you can be hired as an officer in the state of Minnesota. I knew early on what I wanted to do. We were at a local bar, near riot kind of scenario, like 20 plus people fighting. One of my partners is behind me dealing with a few other people, and this guy who's probably 4 or 5 inches taller than me turns around, looks at me, and he goes to grab onto me for a second, realizes I'm an officer, and I tell him, get on the ground, you're under arrest. He said a few expletives, and you can't tell me what to do. You're a dang baby cop. So I'm like, well, okay. The badge on my chest says, yes, this is how it's going to go. I just had to go actually just say, wow, all right. Well, the worst part was my partner right behind me heard him say that. So for the next 5 years, I'm not kidding you, he called me baby cop.
That guy branded you.
Yep, it hung with me for my first 5 years. I was called.
Do you remember his name? Like now it is
Jeff. I won't say his last name, but Officer Jeff. Very good friend of mine. Yes.
Baby cop. Story number 2.
Baby cop.
So that's a good number 2. What's number 3 favorite cop story?
Number 3, another real good one that shows kind of the levity that even we experienced that we were touching on just a few moments ago. Being we are human beings, but we're a representation of different things when we're working, of course. Another partner of mine who got hired a few years after I did, there was a huge crash in the back of our police department, meaning there was a guy driving a big crane truck in a garbage truck sort of scenario, got injured in the process, took out part of a walkway.
Some type of shit or what's going on?
No, this is regular. Nothing special.
Not an officer incident.
Not an officer incident. Correct. So the beautiful part about it, though, to kind of just show you mindset sometimes, he looks at my other partner standing next to him as this happened and said, hey, that person really needs help. Somebody should call somebody. And my partner literally touched him on the shoulder and said, we are that somebody. Now we go to work. We help him out. So that would even happen to us at times too, right? Mm-hmm. That's the human side of things. Even though we're wearing a uniform and we're representing certain things, we have human feelings and emotions too. Mm-hmm. And that's one that stuck with me early on too, that, some people don't quite grasp unless you've been there doing that and different things like that. We have human responses to things too.
So what are some of those misconceptions that people who don't know anyone who's served as an officer or emergency responder or one themselves, what are some of those misconceived ideas that they might have both sides?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that always comes to mind when people ask a question along those lines is there were times when you would leave a call and you would just, because things went totally sideways and totally crazy with whatever the scenario was, and you just needed to mentally decompress for a moment. So you'd meet up car to car with a partner, and sometimes you would just say what you were feeling, right?
He needs a cup of coffee or something to bring a little bit of awesome into his day.
Exactly.
That really reframes that whole idea.
Yeah.
Because I've had that frequency. I don't know where it's from. I don't know who told me that.
Right.
Maybe you're on your break.
Yeah.
Maybe you're doing
it. Sneak like a 3 minutes.
Exactly.
You sneak a 3 minutes real quick. Like that. Or it's I'm so exhausted right now because I've been working for 12 straight hours and I've got a few more to go yet. I just need to close my eyes for 3 minutes, and I'm going to turn my radio down for a second. Matt, can you just listen to the radio? And if we got to roll somewhere, we'll roll somewhere. Let me know. But I just need to check out for a second, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how you do it safely, because you never know.
Well, and even at that point, there's still that radio you're saying. It's like
yes.
It directs where you're supposed to go. Because even if you are sitting there and you're lunch, if there's a bank robbery in front of you, I would assume the protocol would be for you to stop crushing your burger and go take care of the bank robbery, right?
I'm going. Absolutely.
So I don't know anything about the police procedures, so don't quote me on that, anybody. Yeah. But that's so tough, man. So what's the difference in the place of work now? Are you in a better place mentally as far as getting some of that space to just decompress?
Yes, you definitely have a lot more opportunities like that. And it was interesting because when I started in the car business roughly 7 years ago, there was a newer person to auto sales who was having a conversation with a veteran of auto sales who'd been doing it 30 some years. Mm-hmm. And this newer person was like, oh man, this is so stressful, taking care of this, taking care of that, calling customers back, emailing them back, doing this, doing that. And I happened to be walking by. And the person who had been doing it for years said, no, that person knows real stress. you don't know what stress is.
Right. This man was dealing with crackheads and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So just kind of the whole different conception in that regard when you think about it that way, where it's like, yeah, to me, it's not stressful where some other people feel it. But again, my radar for stress is so different than what others have been over the years because of the profession I chose prior to getting into auto sales.
Tell me a little bit about that radar. Is that like a spidey sense for like identifying somebody who finds stress, like body cues? I'm sure there's some level of training for it.
Yep,
so
deep levels.
Tell me, like, high level, like what's some. You can go as deep as you want with this because this is really interesting to me. But like, what's some of the training that you learned as an officer that now you get to apply into sales?
Yeah, fair enough. That's a great question because actually I've had that come up a lot where I would always say trust your gut with a lot of different things, right? And everybody's gut's slightly different. When I was working on the street, a lot of it was I would have scenarios where, like, say we're talking and all of a sudden you're thinking for whatever reason that maybe need to arrest you, right? I'm going to find something out and I'm going to have the thought that I need to arrest you, right? If you're blading off your stance a little bit, like squaring off instead of talking like normal people do, just standing there relaxed, having a conversation. If you're looking over my shoulders and past me, if you're making fists a little bit, if you're starting to get a little louder or bouncing your eyes like you're looking for an escape route, I would always point that out when I was working the street. And it was interesting because people would be like, well, why are you getting a little louder? Why are you yelling at me? And I'm like, well, I'm not yelling. This is yelling. And yell for a second, bring it right back down. I'm like, so everybody around us knows when you decide to run or fight that you're not listening, right? So take that and translate it to my world now in work where you can tell when somebody walks in the door because, unfortunately, a lot of people have been mistreated in the auto industry over the years, is what I found out real quickly, right? They've had a bad experience, a bad relationship with a salesperson. Maybe a dealership didn't treat them right. Maybe the vehicle didn't work out right for them, their needs, wants, mechanically, what have you, right? So they're tense when they're walking in. They're, lady clutching their purse, for example, guy just straight hands in the pockets. I'm not doing nothing. Tense in the back sort of thing, just kind of looking all over. Don't harass me. Don't harass me. One of those kind of things. And I'll just kind of calmly approach them like, hey, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. What would you like to, But with that sort of thing where I'll just kind of read those verbal cues now in the realm that I am in for my profession at the moment, I'll pay attention and see, is a person when they walk in the door, do they feel uncomfortable even right off the bat, right? Can you tell maybe have they been mistreated? Are they looking real quick to be like, please just everybody give me a second to breathe when I walk in, or I call it, sorry, Best Buy. But the Best Buy moment, you walk into the cell phone or computer area of Best Buy. Right. You're like, whoa, I don't even know what I'm looking at yet. Hang on a second, right? So sorry, Best Buy, seriously. But that kind of idea, right? Where they're trying to be helpful, but sometimes it can be off-putting in a way. So I'll do more of a soft approach to somebody and just be like, hey, I'm Chris. Nice to meet you. What are you trying to accomplish? I like to solve people's problems. So I don't introduce myself typically first as a salesperson because, let's be honest, nobody really wants to be sold anything.
Straight to the human level.
Just right down to its bare basics.
Did you do the same thing as an officer when you would meet somebody? Because
yes,
that's probably another high stress situation. Like, you're not coming up to anyone who's like, yo, what's up, Chris? How you doing, man?
Exactly.
You're coming in, it's like, okay, officer, we got some serious stuff going on.
Yes.
Like, what was your approach at that point? Like,
a lot of times it was, hey, just let's slow it down for a second. Does anybody need anything right now? Right? Is anybody
get that out of the way?
Anybody leaking?
Nobody's gonna die here.
Anything else going on? Let's work it back, right? And go that kind of route. Or is anything need to be? I would call it like my mental priority check down list, right?
Okay, so you're doing like a triage almost.
Yes, very much so. Do I need to tamp anything out right away, or can we just start getting to the talking to try to resolve something before it gets to the point where things are totally crazy and out of control? Because they may or may not have been just before I got there, right? Kind of like the mindset of a customer walking in the store. It's natural if you've been treated poorly in the past. Your walls are going up, you're nervous, you're anxious. That's human response to that, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that I work with and that we work with at our dealership too, where they're like, I would rather go to the dentist and have 10 root canals than go through the process of even looking at, let alone possibly even buying one car. I hate it that much. Sorry, that's been the case. It's going to be a different experience. you know, and you can literally just see people like breathing, where they're like, "Really? That's a thing?" I'm like, yeah. I like to solve problems for people, right? Let's strip some of that away as we can.
You were talking about chasing somebody down in a bank robbery earlier. I feel like we need to get back to that at some point. So you were talking about kind of that experience that you have with people when you're coming into an emergency situation. Mm-hmm. Do you have like 2 to 3 pieces of advice for somebody who might find themselves in that situation where, like, hey, I have to pick up the phone and call 911 because whatever. Like, what's some info that if we had, we could help solve the problem we're calling you for better?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest couple of things that come to mind that we would tell people all the time over the years, and I still tell people now as well, it still rings true as well, is if your gut or those hairs on the back of your neck say, maybe I should call somebody and get somebody else involved, that's usually a yes, right? Because something's telling you something's going wrong and you may need a little more assistance at a different level than what you can offer or what you can elicit from around you. So that part's nice where if you have that feeling, go ahead and try to get somebody involved earlier rather than later. Because typically that's going to allow it to be taken care of before it gets real chaotic or somebody gets seriously hurt or whatever the case may be in that regard.
So
try to focus.
Pre-call, like
try to call earlier.
Absolutely. Your spidey sense goes off and you're like, okay. You ask yourself the question, it's a yes.
I would say that's a yes.
So that's an indicator of pick the phone up and call. So now maybe, what about they made the call, whoever, like in that conversation with, what's the person who answers the phone? I feel like they need some credit too.
Yep.
Like what's their time?
That's very stressful for them. They're dispatchers and we used to joke affectionately, but they're kind of stuck in a hole in a building somewhere. They don't physically experience what's going on either the caller's side, the person needing help, or the officer or the deputy's side, but they mentally experience all of it. They're just passing every bit of info they can get and trying to get as much info they can to get it to people who are on the way there to try to help, whatever the scenario is. But they experience it themselves too. It's just 100%.
They're trained to not bring that emotion into it, though.
Yes.
Right? Because if they do, now they can't accomplish what they need, and now whatever information they pass is probably or could be off, right?
Correct.
Because now instead of facts and details and uncovering more information as fast as possible, they're focusing on, damn, bro, that sounds shitty. Or like, okay, so just knowing that because they aren't giving you that emotional response that we would expect from somebody on the other side of the phone when we're delivering info like this.
Yes.
Don't let that cloud how you're thinking about what you're telling them, right? Because like they're doing their job and you want them to respond this way. So that's really powerful, right? What about like what type of information is there, like advice around how to communicate with those people?
First and foremost, try to breathe yourself if you're the one calling for the help and slow your breathing down just a little bit so you can take in as much of the question or questions they're asking you in sequence because they have their check down list of are there any vehicles involved? Do you know what color, what type? And I don't mean exact make and model of the vehicle, but even just a general description or same thing with general description of a person involved, whether it be a bad actor, a victim, or a good actor, because we want to know who obviously the bad actors are, who we're really, paying attention for, but also who needs the help, what are they dressed like, what exactly is going on with them.
Who's not?
Right, and who are the good people who may be even trying to help, because I don't want to treat the good person trying to help just out of the kindness of their heart like they're a bad actor.
I feel like that's
a real thing too.
Well, because
it's huge.
Because you're just coming in and like, I'm sure people have different responses. The people that are coming to you and communicating, maybe you can assume they might be a good actor. And anyone who's going away, one could assume that they're right. And your job is to make sure you bad actors aren't getting away. So you're catching them all, right? But in reality, if you know, hey, that guy called over there and he's just like trying to stay out of the way, then maybe by having that, maybe some of the crazy stuff that happens with that information, because now you know the actors in that scene or setting where you're coming to it, right? Because you're just showing up like, okay, what's going on? And it's like you have to discover and pull these layers back while keeping low emotion, at least from yourself, so you can think loud. Understanding what additional info you need to be able to create a direction and an ideal outcome. Because I'm sure at the end of the day, you're not showing up like, all right, I'm looking forward to throwing somebody in the back of the truck today.
Never.
Like, that's not the goal. Like,
no, that never is.
I would assume the goal is to not do that and to keep everybody safe.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so before I keep getting too far from where I was going with that, so communicating that info with the actor who's on scene, very important. Any other info there to communicate with the dispatcher?
That's the couple of big things kind of right off the bat.
So now,
because it's hard, natural human emotion, and this is one thing I would tell people a lot is I lived in that world all day.
Just straight emotion, you got to be missing robot.
You have to take all of that. So here's a great example of this, right? Like a family member of mine a little over a year ago witnessed it where a car hit a deer, right? So this family member called me, and the family member's freaking out, and I'm like, hey, listen, just take a breath, relax for a second. Try this, try that, is help on the way, all these other things, right? And then when we got off the phone, I realized, wait a second, that was like the first 20 minutes of my 12 hours of every day I was at work. So my radar for crazy is very different than that family member's is, right? That's probably the craziest thing that family member's seen in years and years.
Yeah.
So I called that family member back and I apologized promptly. I said, I don't know that I handled that necessarily the best way I could have. Right? And by
I had
that,
my cop brain.
Exactly.
My human.
I flipped the switch for a second, right? Because you called me, you're freaking out. I have that brain as compared to the emotional family member as well, where I'm like, can we just kind of do a retake of that for a second? And thankfully, that family member was like, no, I get it. I understand. And maybe part of me wanted that response from you because I knew you would calm me down, which I thought was kind of neat because I hadn't even considered that realistically. I just felt bad because I didn't feel that I took care of that family member how I should have in that moment. Once I realized very quickly, their gauge for crazy is very different than mine, right? Just out of experience.
Like, their reality, too, as a byproduct. Like, your reality is the fact, like, you've seen, like, all the stuff people are slowing down to look at for car accidents. You've been at those multiple, like...
I get a lot of that when I get asked the question, do I watch, like, the show like Cops or Live PD or other things like that? I'm like, I live that. I don't need to watch that. It's okay. I get why you might answer that's okay, but and it could be in some ways, depending on what scenarios going on and different things like that. But I'm like, no, I like my life a little more calm now.
So what should somebody know about that time? All right, so dispatcher's been called. We've communicated all the stuff perfectly because we listened to this video and the podcast. And now there's that period of time between that. What do we need to know about that?
The biggest thing is no matter what's going on, keep in mind, and this is again what a lot of people don't know, if they haven't been in the uniform and been the one showing up when there's a lot of times craziness and chaos going on, we're always reacting to what we're given. Okay? And by that I mean whether it's good, bad, and everything in between, whether it's verbalization, physicality, whatever the case may be, I'm always behind the eight ball trying to play catch up, right? To make sure that the situation is as static as possible. So if somebody starts getting really emotional or they're just not listening at all, it may go a different way, meaning a good actor or somebody who had good intentions, but they're amped up because they're all spun up because of what they just saw and experienced or addressed or dealt with. If they're not listening to what I'm telling them, of calm down, hang over here for a minute or whatever the case may be, if they're still spun up, it might go a different way initially. It doesn't mean it can't be worked back, right? Meaning if you're listening to what's going on, it can usually be taken care of pretty easily.
And if they know that you're just doing your job, so by asking you a question, you're not necessarily assuming the worst, but you need to verify.
Yes.
Right.
It's the old trust but verify kind of thing, right?
Okay.
Trusting
That's
the
powerful
information
right now.
I've been given. Very much so, right? So, like, one of the examples I use for people all the time is say I go overseas to a country, I don't speak the language. I don't even know what's being spoken right now, but I have an officer in uniform who's pointing a gun, happens to be at my friend and I walking down the street. I'm not going to stand there and argue. I'm not going to try to work through whatever. I'm going to get on the ground, right? We'll sort back whatever it is. Maybe I got...
You're not going to solve all the world.
Yeah.
Get down, dude.
Nothing's going to happen in that next 10 seconds other than bad stuff if I don't do it. So that's the best kind of way to relay that in a very quick response as well. Anticipate
that you're going to have a question. So checking those boxes. What about that first 60 seconds? Like, what did somebody expect? Like, take us there. Like, I called you for make it up. Make up a scenario.
Don't run, don't fight.
I feel like those are
right. Those should be basics, but they still happen a lot. Much like in, say, a traffic stop scenario, even if you think you were the one not speeding, if you're arguing that wasn't me or this, that, and the other, it's probably not going to end well for you, right? So don't run, don't fight. Just have a conversation, try to let things calm down a little bit, let the officer verify what, even if you were the caller, what you told the dispatcher and got everything laid out there, let them determine, yes, that's all correct information. And then the next steps would be, is it, say, an arrestable scenario? Is it a counseling moment? Is it a conversation? Is it a, hey, let's all make better choices next time sort of scenario? Because there's lots of different ways things can play in that regard. So, yeah, it was amazing to me how many times over the years where somebody always thought, hey, this is a really good time to try to fight right now. Fight back or just try to run.
Like, or like conversation that's additional to the shit you're already trying to solve, like on site. Like, I don't have time to like go back and forth on why you can or can't record me. Just get the frick out of the way, dude.
Exactly.
Type of thing.
Yep.
Man.
Exactly.
Why the heck would you ever want to go into a job like that? That sounds like, I mean, I'm so incredibly grateful for the police officers that we do have. Like, why did you personally take that on and start that 16-year journey?
The answer for me is I always felt that it was what I was meant to do. I had some family members in my background on both sides of my family that served in the military. I didn't figure that the military was for me, but I felt service was important, both in how I was raised and how I saw my family treating and taking care of each other and friends and various things like that. So I was actually the first in my family to go law enforcement.
Can you tell me like the first moment, take us back to that moment where you remember having that first step. How old were you?
That first time kind of thought, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
Give or take.
So you, doesn't sound like it was being preached to you. You're from this long line of officers, but you, like in your heart or your gut, just like it was pulling at you. So then did you just do the whole, I'm going to train for this and become like this super cop from 8 or 9, or did it kind of come, like, was it that voice that was kind of there and then at some point it's like, oh, that's why you've been ignoring it? It's like, what was that journey like from identifying to, I'm going to really pursue this?
That's a great question, and it's the latter is the answer. So it was always kind of that voice in the background. What happened is it was always there, and I knew I kind of wanted to do something with the law and law enforcement type of thing. So actually when I graduated high school and when I went to college, I started, my first year I was looking at business and pre-law. I was figuring potentially be like some sort of business and or law attorney or otherwise. And then all of a sudden one day the switch just flipped in my head and said, no, I don't want to be on that side of that process. I want to be the one helping on the front line, helping as many people as I can out there that legitimately need help in different things.
Do you know what flipped the switch?
I can't really say anything in particular. I think how I was raised, the environment I was raised in, the high school that I went to, we had touched on that a little bit. I went to Park Center High School. There was some rough elements there. So graduated in 94. There were a handful of us that had gone to school together that became officers and COs, correction officers as well, and a handful of everything else. But I think a lot of times you can be a product of your environment, right?
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and I always felt I had this calling to do something bigger than what I am and help somebody whenever possible. That's really what led me down that path in that regard. So then I did a little bit of research and realized I don't want to go down that path, down college. I want to get my 2-year degree and go to the academy and be an officer. And
the academy. I mean, I feel like that's on every like good cop show out there. Like they reference this. It's almost like it's like purgatory. It's like this space, and nobody like really knows what the heck it actually is. Like, what do you do there?
So for here in the state of Minnesota, it's different than most other states in the country. Some places, yes, actually,
yeah,
to that point, you're right. Our education standards are better than most other places. A lot of places in the country, you only need to have a high school degree and go to 6 weeks of a police officer.
Side note, it's the same way for pest control too.
Okay. There you go. There you go.
That's the only thing I'm.
No, but so you have to get your 2-year degree minimum. A lot of people will get their 4-year degree. I did not because I knew early on that's exactly what I wanted to do, and I wanted to start getting after it right away. So then the police academy here is 9 months long, is what it is. So 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Are you
living on site, or you still
driving to it?
Okay, so
it's like a college campus. Correct. So you would go to law classes, both writing search warrants, what the laws that you're trying to enforce on the street, what it's going to look like later when you're testifying in court, different things. So there were a few different law classes mixed in there. There was use of force, so the physical part, the PT stuff, making sure we're in shape and beating the snot out of each other, getting after it in that regard with batons. You get maced, you get tased, handcuffs a lot.
I feel like that's the only part of the whole experience that I think actually exists. Like all the other stuff is like, when I think of it, the academy is like, this is where you're training for the battle. That's probably what, like this much of it?
Actually, a decent portion of it, truth be told.
The health side of it, like to be able to do these things in that scenario, you're at this level.
Yes. So there's that component, and then you're driving a retired squad car around at night too, practicing traffic stops and high-level traffic stops, meaning like felony type stops where you're calling people out of the car and back to you. They call them patrol operations classes.
So is that like a stage scenario, or you're riding along with the officer actually in the field?
Stage in a controlled setting. Yep.
That's powerful from a sales tool standpoint. I'm just going to stop because I love role playing, and that's literally role playing to the.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't practice, like, go, what do you have to be able, is there, like, final tests, or, like, in my mind, this is what happens. There's, like, this big, like, obstacle course, and if you don't beat the obstacle course, is that how it works?
There's none like that here, but there probably is somewhere. You're probably not too far off somewhere.
All right.
Think of it like a series of mini tests along the way.
Okay, so checkpoints. Like, you don't make it past here, so you got to come back for another 9 months. Are there guys that do that?
Yes. There's some where that's the case. Correct. And some where they realize partway through even that first round of 9 months, this isn't what I wanted.
Okay.
This isn't the deal.
Is there a point where they're like, this guy's been here 62 times or something, like, he can't keep. There's a reason why he's asked, like.
Yeah. They do have a career counselor with you that they match up with you when you get in the academy.
And it's that guy.
That's that tough conversation.
Let's take you to the HR route.
Yes. Let's go to
the dispatcher.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you have time on the range and weapons training and different things, both with handguns, long guns, shotguns, different things
you
like
guys
that.
get like the. So what? All right, this is just another. I hope this isn't valuable use of your time, because I'm just asking all the questions. Like, what do they do when they bring some cool new stuff in? Where they're like, this is some new tech. This is going to help us do our job safer, better, faster, whatever it's trying to accomplish. Like, what do they do? Are they like, hey, everybody, like, come check out this thing? Or is
it's
like,
not willy-nilly, if you want to put it that way. Because that's when bad things can happen, right?
What do you mean by that?
Like, let's say, for example, when tasers came. Let's see how they react.
So did you do it?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a very controlled setting when that happens. You do coursework where you learn about that tool itself, what it's supposed to do, what it's meant to do, and then you see a bunch of videos, and then it's actual hands-on utilizing that tool, right? With some different things along that route. So it's not mandatory that you get shot for a full round of the taser ride, if you will, of the full 5 seconds, but it's strongly recommended that you do. The reason being, so if I use my taser on you, for example, and now we're in court later, and I have to testify to the fact why I tried to tase you, but it didn't work out.
And I knew what happened afterwards.
Yeah, I knew what it was trying to accomplish. and it didn't accomplish that, and here's likely the reason why, right? Maybe you had some baggy clothes on, right? Maybe you had drugs and or alcohol in your system. Maybe you would watch some videos yourself as being a bad actor, like actual people in prison, they'll train and have been for years. When tasers came on the scene, knowing that the electricity goes through the not only the probe but the cord going to it, that you would drop on the ground and try to spin to sever one of those cords because now you're not being tased and you're not pushing skull, right? There's no direct connection. Right, but to that point, right? Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I did it for the full time, so I knew when I had to go to court to testify, hey, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what it's supposed. This is what it's.
It didn't work. It didn't work out in the way I
expected.
I expected to because of
X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and now being zoomed out and looking at it, not in that moment, I can see that.
Yes.
So if I would have known this at that point, I wouldn't have done that. And you not having that information, it allows you to make those decisions better. Like that metacognition of like thinking about how you think is something I try to practice a lot and I talk to my employees about a lot. It almost sounds like training the ability to do that and remove emotion from a scenario so that the logical part of your brain can work. That's what a lot of the training is, because it's not, oh, let's get these guys jacked up on a bunch of Mountain Dew and like let them go right around with guns and radios. And
let it rip and hope for the best.
Like, these guys, they don't have these big like roid rage type of vibe. You told me that you believe you were born for this, right? And you just kind of discovered that within yourself as you matured and heard that voice. So it's actually the exact opposite from what I can tell. So how important is that ability to think about how you think that you were trained to do through the 16 years and everything there? How do you apply that in your day-to-day, just as an employee or a dad or a coach?
It's a great example of just that. So like a lot of people have a hard time of breaking down what was I thinking in that moment, what did I see, and what choices did I make to respond, and what can I do differently, whether it be as an employee to my employer, whether it be a coworker to my other coworkers, how I'm engaging with that, whether how I'm working with my customers and how that is going, to just self-critique and, okay, well, I tried that and that didn't work, so I'm certainly not going to do that again. Maybe I'll try option B next time, right? Or option C or what have you. I do it a lot. Both, we talk through some versions of that with the teams that I coach, with the other coaches I coach with as well, where that's very beneficial for us, where, hey, do you see what I'm seeing? And I'll use versions of that with the players as well, right? Where there's a lot of teams we face, especially when the kids are younger in whatever sport that I've coached over the years, doesn't matter, where coaches are yelling just to be loud, and it can come off as like yelling at the team and at the players. But we make a very conscious moment to say, there's times where we have to be loud so I know that you can hear me and what we're trying to relay back and forth, and then we can talk quietly about it and break it down in the dugout. Let's say baseball, for example, or on the bench if we're football or basketball.
But people just go straight to emotion.
Exactly, right? And to that point, actually, my 13-year-old just told me the other day, it was really a powerful moment we had. He goes, Dad, a bunch of the guys and I were talking just the other day that now we get all of it saying for years. And right that 13, 14 is where it starts to really click. He's like, you and the other coaches were never just being loud, because we've seen that happen with other teams and they're just like being screamed at or otherwise, right? But you're doing things with a definite purpose, right? And now it all is making sense, and we really appreciate that. And we get it better. And I'm like, just blew your mind.
You're like,
right?
Thank God, I haven't been wasting my breath this whole time.
Yeah, so I think it translates into a lot of different things, right? And the biggest thing is you have to be vulnerable in a way too, to do that, because you have to be able to be self-cognizant of a lot of those different things and how you're arriving at certain
Be unbiased of yourself too.
Exactly. And that's a vulnerable place to be sometimes. It really is. When you think about it.
Do you have some advice that you would give to like, something you've learned from your experience, all the training you've been through? Like, what's a few pieces of advice that can help a parent be better at that? Be better at like the analysis of those scenarios with their kids?
One of my biggest things that I've determined over the years with my kids that age they are right now, one being middle school and one being high school. And this goes from being an officer over the years, from being a coach, from being a parent, from everything that I've experienced in the last years is just try to listen to your kids a little more. I don't think we give them the benefit of the doubt enough to hear their viewpoint towards certain things. Now, granted, if they're going way off on a tangent and they're starting to freak out about whatever, reel them in a little bit, right? But I think if we give them the opportunity to hear them and listen to them a little bit more and their feelings and emotions towards things, I think they're picking up a lot more of what we're trying to teach them than what we realize over the years, right? I think we don't give them enough credit. And that goes across all spectrums of everything I've experienced over the last 25 years in my adult life in that regard, where it's, if we just, and a good example of that real quick is in the coaching world, you know, I think back to when I was a player myself in my youth days, I knew exactly where I ranked amongst my peers on a team for whatever sport it is, right? Kids are very self-aware of where they are with their classmates, with their friends in their friend group, with their team, what have you, right? Mm-hmm. Parents' viewpoint is one, coach is another, and the players is somewhere else, right? So I would usually have a conversation with the parents about, if I needed to, well, have you listened to your young kiddo and what do they feel about what's going on? Because our time is over with. Our youth and our playing days and everything like that, this is their time now. Maybe we should try to focus in a little bit more on what they're trying to tell us and hear them and meet them where they're at. Because I think sometimes so many parents or adults get caught up in their own moments and their own worlds, their emotions. Yeah. Exactly. That we forget it's not about me, it's about Johnny. That's if I can boil it all down to one thing, it all comes down to that. Because once you start listening to your kiddo, whatever age they're at, they're going to feel valued and honored more. They're going to open up to you more about some of the tough moments they're having.
So let's say that a parent becomes a better listener. What sort of questions should they ask themselves about what they're hearing? Right, because now you're opening yourself to at least let somebody else have the floor in the conversation.
Right.
So what do you ask yourself to best digest that?
The biggest thing, kind of next step from that was, because here's the other thing, how I react to what you're giving me in whatever scenario we're talking, I have a conscious choice in that, right? Am I going to react purely on emotion? Is it going to be more of a logical side? Am I going to try to take a step back quite a ways? Or is it going to be a mix of that? And each scenario can be slightly different, in my opinion, in that regard.
Know thyself. Understand how you're going to respond so that you can decide whether or not to get that response.
Exactly.
If you're not,
then maybe check that for a moment and give a different version of a response. One of those sort of things.
Bro, we got so much good stuff here. I want to be really respectful of your time. Also, I want to shout out your employer, who is an amazing family. Anything you want to say particularly about what you're doing over there?
Absolutely. So a couple of the basics when it comes to that is working for the Pole Ads is amazing. They're some of the best employers I've ever worked for in that regard. Their answer is always easy. I hired with them. The answer I was given was, the Pole Ads look at it this way. Whatever the customer wants or needs, figure out a way to make that happen. Because when the customer is happy, that makes us happy. Everything boils down to that.
Just simplifying it. So
it's just that it makes it so simple.
Yeah, we actually do. We've done some work for members of their family before, and I mean, it's a really well-known name locally. They got their fingers in so many different businesses. As I think about like the fact that they've communicated that information with you in a way where you can say, so it makes me know that there's been so much depth of thought for who they really are.
Probably the easiest and quickest would be, there's only 2 times I don't answer my phone. I joke with people, one is when I'm working with the customer and they're right in front of my face. I figured that's the courteous thing to do. That's how I was raised, and most people are like, yeah, that totally makes sense, right? Because I will feel that you're not valuing my time if I'm talking with you at your place of business and you're answering the phone for somebody randomly calling in. It just is what it is, right? But I get back to you right afterwards, or you can text me, or if I'm actively coaching one of my boys, one of my teams right now, but I get back to you after that as well. When I split, I do turn my ringer out there. There's a little back understanding. Yeah. I'll play out the last.
So what's your phone number real quick?
Phone number is 636-7958.
And don't let the Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram scare you away. This man helped me get a Toyota. So, like, he can work some angles, help you get it taken care of. One last question before I let you go on the Homegrown Hustle. Prep you for this. So, if you had to describe the word hustle in terms of work, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means I'm going to get after it different than anybody else I know, every possible opportunity that I get. I like to say my grind is different.
Yeah, buddy. I love that. My grind is different. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Homegrown Hustle podcast. So much today. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us. Is there any last thing you want to say to anybody who might be listening?
I just want to say, if you've ever been treated, unfortunately, in a difficult manner through auto sales, or had a bad car, poop on you, anything else along those lines, just not treat you how you wanted, anything along those lines, there are people out there who are looking to take care of you. I happen to be one of them, so please feel free to look me up. It'll be a whole different experience than you've ever imagined, is the first thing. And second thing is, thank you very much for what you're doing.
Amen.
I appreciate your time here as well.
Yeah, this was a blast. I'm so grateful for you taking it. This is your day.
Yes.
So Chris Knight, The Dark Knight. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thanks again for joining us on Homegrown Hustle. Our local business community thrives because of the brilliant leaders right here in our backyard. And it's been an absolute privilege to provide them with a platform to share their invaluable expertise. Stay tuned for more insight, wisdom, and inspiration from our local business champions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Together, we'll continue to nurture and expand our homegrown success stories. Matt Eickman signing off until our next insightful episode.